Hi everybody, welcome once again, and in today's video I will explain you the concept of bilateral monopoly. Bilateral monopoly is a market consisting of a single seller monopolist and a single buyer monopsonist. Now before starting with bilateral monopoly, let's have a look at the marginal expenditure and average expenditure curves of the monopsonist. Let's assume that this monopsonist will be buying copper as an input, and since this firm is relatively a large firm, Monopsony being the single buyer for copper here. So when it buys more units of copper, it will drive the price of copper up. So this average expenditure curve also represents the supply curve of copper for the monopsonist. So when it buys more units of copper, it will lead to increase in price of copper, and obviously will lead to increase in the overall total expenditure of the monopsonist, and will ultimately lead to increase in the marginal expenditure. Marginal expenditure is the additional cost of buying one more unit. So both are upward sloping. D represents the demand curve for the monopsonist, and since there is only a single buyer in the market, this demand curve D represents average revenue curve of the monopolist seller. Then we have corresponding marginal revenue curve. This is a marginal cost curve for the monopolist. The monopsonist buyer is aware of his market power, and being a profit maximizer, he would like to impose his own price terms on the seller. In other words, if he thinks that he can force the supplier to accept the price set by him, then he would be supplied by the seller the quantity at which the marginal cost of the monopolist is equal to the price set by the monopsonist. And here, and we can say that the marginal cost curve of the monopolist is the supply curve for the monopsonist. The profit maximizer monopolist would like to attain equilibrium at point E, defined by the intersection of marginal revenue and marginal cost curves, charging a price of P and quantity producing quantity Q. But this profit maximizing condition could not be attained by the producer. Reason being, he is not selling in a market with many buyers, but he is selling his output to the monopsonist, who obviously can affect the price in the market by change in his purchasing decisions. ME represents the marginal expenditure curve of the monopsonist. The equilibrium for the profit maximizer monopsonist is determined at point E1 by the intersection of marginal expenditure curve and demand curve. The monopsonist would like to buy Q2 units of input at price P2 determined by point A on the supply curve. The monopsonist buyer does not buy from a lot of small firms who would be price taker, that is, they would accept the price imposed by the buyer, but from the monopolist who would like to charge a price of P. Now the buyer wants to pay P2 and the seller wants to charge price P. This will lead to indeterminacy in the market. Ultimately, the two firms will negotiate and will decide on a price which will lie between the price range of P and P2, which obviously will depend on their bargaining power and skills in the market. Bilateral monopoly is rare in commodity market, but is quite common in labor market, where workers organize themselves in union and confront a single employer.